All right, so we're going to do some critiquing on Our Destructive Readers. Normally, I'm pretty disappointed by what I see on here, but I've actually found something. I just skimmed the first paragraph that I think is actually quite good and worth our time. So let's get into it. Um, so it's called The Chief. I guess we should read the preamble. I tried something new with this story, and I really have no idea if it's too on the nose or horribly vague. There's a shift at the halfway mark, and I'm not really sure if it works. Curious to hear your thoughts, what you think it was about, how well it was executed, whether it kept you interested, and any other feedback. Thanks. Okay. Slush sprayed about as the boy paddled along the side of the road. His father had attached fenders, and the boy wore boots and snow bibs and remained dry. A little bit of parataxis there. If his progress was any faster, he would have to contend with the cold air, making his eyes water, but he was untroubled by his pace. His beanie pulled low and coat zipped high, he buried his chin deep and peered through the narrow gap across the frozen field. Only a slight difference in tone separated the snow-covered dirt from an overcast sky. A row of pines on the opposite side of the road shielded him from a crosswind, affording the luxury of curiosity. So, this is well written. This is definitely one of the more well written things I find on the subreddit. There are a couple of extra words. About immediately jumped out to me as something like, slush sprayed is the same as slush sprayed about. It doesn't really help me understand, or it doesn't really improve the picture of the slush spraying. There's some things I would rework, but the notable issue is there's no conflict. But it's well written. You get the scene. I can see this very easily. Yeah. So like, can I comment? Okay, I can't. So I would cut about here. This sentence is kind of not like it's kind of I forget the term for this, but you're jumping between focal points. His father had attached fenders. Okay. And the boy wore boots and snow bibs and remained dry. So, like, who is this sentence about? Is this sentence about the father? Because we start with the father right up front. So I'm thinking about the father attaching the fenders, and the boy wore boots and snow bibs and remained dry. Okay, so obviously we're talking about the bike now, but I'm kind of having to, like, change the picture in my mind. So I would even, maybe it's not worth having the father, either talk about the dad and his impact on the bike, but I wouldn't even go with that, to be honest. But like, you can see, it's your story. You write it however you like. But this sentence is, I think, kind of shifting. And now we're back to the boy. So his father had attached fenders. So we go from the dad to the bike, and then we're back to what the boy is wearing. It's too much. We're kind of shifting around and jumping around too much in one sentence, in my opinion. In a short sentence. If his progress was any faster, he would have to contend with the cold air making his eyes water. I would just make it so you don't have to go very fast in a bike, especially as a kid, if you haven't biked in a while, as a little kid, to make your eyes water a little bit. And, why not? Why not just cut the word count, have his eyes water a little bit? There's nothing lost, in my opinion, by just adding a little bit of, visceral feeling. I can really imagine, I can get into the bike myself if I can, my eyes are watering. That's kind of what I remember what it feels like. But, this sentence is basically saying, and nothing happened, and remained dry. He was biking through the slush, but nothing happened. Make his eyes water, gosh, it wouldn't hurt you. His beanie pulled low and coat zipped high. He buried his chin deep and peered through the narrow gap across the frozen field. So this other thing, this is a perfectly fine sentence, I think. He buried his chin, maybe cut deep. He buried his chin in his coat would be a little better, because then it's. I mean, when you say buried his chin, it's clearly like that's what's happening. But I think in his coat would make it more real. But this is a fine sentence otherwise. But it's cold. You're establishing it's cold, so yeah, why not have his eyes water? It's cold. You'll save words. You'll add a little something, a little, joie de vivre, and that's not what you're adding, but you're adding a little something to it. And you're saving words, and you're going on to establish that it's cold. So, only a slight difference in tone separated snow-covered dirt from an overcast sky. I think you can do better. Only a slight difference in tone. There's just, you can get more out of this sentence. I think if you're going to write about this, your sentences should all be. There should be no boring sentences. Things, if it doesn't necessarily need to be like this action-packed. And the snow came in a tornado. It doesn't need to be that. But if you're going to write about this, make it evocative of something, or make it, engaging. Only a slight difference in tone is not exciting. So I think this is the only sentence where I would just say do better on it. Take some time. A row of pines on the opposite side of the road shielded him from a crosswind, affording the luxury of curiosity. I would just say across the road. That would maybe save some word count. On the opposite side of isn't like I'm not ruining some beautiful metaphor or literary whatever. I'm not like across the road. That's not the exciting part of the sentence. So just shorten it. A row of pines across the road shielded him from a crosswind, affording the luxury of curiosity. So affording the luxury of curiosity. I get it. So it's not so windy, so he can look around, and I guess that's why his eyes aren't watering. I understand why you've done this. I don't think that I don't think it's a contradiction to have your eyes watering a little bit and then go on to see the deer in the next paragraph. I think you can have your eyes watering a little bit and still see the deer. It's not Jesus. If you're biking down the road, it's not like, oh my God, I can't see anything. Yeah, you're a little kid. You're not in the Tour de France where you need your freaking goggles on. You'll be all right. I understand why you did this, but don't worry. There's no contradiction. You're okay. And if somebody says they're not, tell them to go ride a bike and for God's sake, they'll be okay. You'd see the deer. Okay. He spotted the 4 deer bedded down in the pines just 10 yards from the road. He stopped and straddled his bike and watched them, but they only stared back. In his coat pocket was a sandwich bag full of crackers that his mother had given him, and he wondered whether deer like crackers, but decided against throwing some for fear of scaring them away. He pushed off and told them goodbye, looking over his shoulder and seeing them still staring unbothered. This is interesting. The only thing I don't like is, but they only stared back. That's fine for them to do, but I think this is a little more powerful if, they were just grazing or something, and then they see him and look up. Or if they have just been watching him the whole time and they saw him before he saw them, say that. I think this isn't wrong, but you can add something here to make the deer, as characters, come alive a little bit more. If the deer are grazing and they look up at him, that says something. That's speaking to just they're deer and this is what they do. But they find something, they're just regular deer. If they were already watching him and they just sort of just keep watching him, that's supernatural and creepy. It'll depending on what tone you're going for. This is much better than almost everything else I've ever read on this subreddit. By the way, it seems like I'm picking stuff apart, but this is. Just the quality of writing is so much better. I'm having a great time with this. He pushed off and told them goodbye, looking over his shoulder and seeing them all still staring unbothered. I never liked the word still. It's not wrong here, but it's just began, where I'm this can probably be written better or a word can be cut. I don't hate it. Looking over his shoulder and seeing, I don't hate it. I'm the first time I read it, it sort of set off alarm bells, but I think that was just a gut reaction. And upon reading this more, I don't dislike it as much. This is a pretty solid paragraph. He stopped and straddled his bike and watched them, and I don't know if "but" is correct. He stopped and straddled his bike and watched them. Period. They only stared back. I think that's a little stronger. If you want to use a conjunction, I don't know if "but" is the correct one. That's not really in contradiction of watching them. Okay, in his coat pocket was a sandwich bag full of crackers that his mother had given him, and he wondered whether deer like crackers, but decided against throwing some for fear of scaring them away. Yeah, I like that. He pushed off and told them goodbye, looking over his shoulder and seeing them still staring unbothered. Yeah, I like that paragraph. Further along the road, the boy passed an old cemetery. He had recently watched the cemetery pass by through the car window and asked his parents whether their dog Luna would be buried there. His father told him no, and the only people... So, just a quick thing, would be implies the dog is dead and not yet buried. So, that's something I'm going to be watching for later. But right now, the dog is, dead somewhere. Could be any number of places, I guess, but not buried. His father told him no, and the only people were buried there, and that only people were buried there, and besides, no one had been buried in that cemetery for many years. The boy asked where then they would bury Luna. Okay, so yeah, clearly the dog is not. Okay, so yeah, you've done that correctly then. His father told him the dog doctor had already taken care of her. All right, all right. I don't hate this. You're painting the kid as very young, that the mom can't just say veterinarian. You're painting the child as like, you know, young, like 7 at the oldest, maybe 8 at the veterinarian isn't a big stretch. And it's, I don't know. That's just what you're painting. You're painting a picture of a younger child, and maybe that's right. I'm also saying things that are like for people listening that aren't you and I. What did that mean? Where was she? His father cut in to tell the boy how proud he was of how he had taken the news. He was tough. Yeah, very young child. Now I'm thinking like 5. When they first told him a few days before, his voice quivered when he asked if it was true. Then he went back to playing, but without knowing it, every night he went to bed, and Luna didn't leap up and cover his feet. Turmoil grew and circulated while brown fur still clung to his blankets. Okay. Further along the road, the boy passed an old cemetery. He had recently watched the cemetery pass by through the car window and asked his parents whether their dog Luna would be buried there. Okay. I'm just kind of thinking about it. His father told him no, and that only people were buried there. And besides, no one had been buried in that cemetery for many years. I don't know if that's... I'm just trying to think this out. You're very protective of this young kid. I guess you throw it in, sure, as a comment. Like, I'm just seeing how realistic is that, like, that detail that the dad would... Like, the dad would not really be concerned. I don't know. I hope you understand what I'm thinking about. If this is a realistic comment. I don't hate it. I'm just thinking. Thinking is okay. The boy asked where then would they bury Luna? Okay. His mother told him the dog doctor had already taken care of her. By the way, I'm okay with there not being any like dialogue so far. It's a choice. I don't think it's wrong, but it is a choice that you can make for sure. His mother told him the dog doctor had already taken care of her. What does that mean? Oh, you asked that. What does that mean? Okay, fair enough. Where was she? His father cut in to tell the boy, okay. When they first told him a few days before, his voice quivered when he asked if it was true. And then went back to playing. You're not supposed to start a sentence with a conjunction. You can, obviously. You can break some rules. But without knowing it, every night that he went to bed and Luna didn't leap up and cover his feet, turmoil grew and circulated, while brown fur still clung to his blankets. So we've got a shift in the omniscience of the narrator. Like, who knows this? Nobody knows this except the narrator. I also have an issue with circulated here. I'm not clear on what that means. Like, what's the path? What's the circular path that the turmoil is following? Turmoil grew and circulated. I don't really like and circulated here. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. But again, very solid paragraph. Very solid writing. Beyond the first few rows of decrepit headstones, all askew, was a stately obelisk that was even taller than his father. If Luna could be buried in that cemetery, that one would be hers. He would put a statue of her on top of it, one folded ear and all. So, all here, I think you could find a good active verb. Beyond the first few rows of decrepit headstones, canted askew, slanted askew, bent as if there was, bent against a wind that was not here, something like that. I don't know. That was bad. But the first ones, I don't like all askew. You could even cut all. I don't, like, it's not wrong again. Like, I keep saying it, this is a great, like, I'm happy, I'm enjoying this piece. I think you could get a better word here, a better active verb. Decrepit headstones grew askew, like, that's an interesting image. I'm just trying to like spitball a bunch of stuff. Something about it growing or leaning or whatever. The thing about like putting a leaning one here is that it makes askew redundant, but I don't think that's bad either. Like you could change all askew for a leaning active verb. You know what I'm trying to say. Let's do an active verb. I don't like was here. Again, let's do another active verb. Beyond the first few of decrepit headstones that blah 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 slanted, canted. A stately obelisk grew even taller than his father. A stately obelisk dominated let's do an active verb instead of the was, and the was is the very passive. Oh, my camera's freaking out. That's okay. Let me just see if I can fix that. Should fix itself. Whatever, maybe it won't. Okay, fixed it. So, yeah, okay. All askew is a stately obelisk that was even taller than his father. I would clean this up, and the way to do that is remove the was, the plural of was, and then put in some active verbs. If Luna could be buried in that cemetery, isn't wrong, but this might be a good spot for a was. If Luna was buried in that cemetery, this one would be hers. I think this is better than that in this context. If Luna was buried in this cemetery, that one would be hers. I'm looking between your this and that's. Because, okay, you're driving by it. If Luna could be buried in that cemetery, that one would be hers. Again, it's not wrong. I just don't think it's quite 100%. If Luna could be buried, you could even say here maybe. If Luna could be buried there, if Luna could be buried in that cemetery, that one would be hers. It's not wrong. I don't hate it. I'm not even going to offer a real suggestion of change. I just feel like there might be a better thing here. I think I'm probably overthinking it. I'm sure it's fine. He would put a statue of her on top of it, one folded ear and all. I would clean this up a teeny bit. He would put a statue on her plot. Instead of an obelisk, he would have a statue. Like, on top of it is kind of like on top of the obelisk almost. And, like, it's a little confusing, and we're kind of losing focus of what we want to be talking about. That one would be hers. Like, that spot or that gravestone then? Like, what is it about, if not for the giant obelisk, what is the thing about that spot that is attracting him to it? Because if it's not the obelisk, clearly you're trying to replace it with a statue, so it's not that. If not that, then what? I rambled a little bit there, but I hope you kind of got what I was saying. Okay, let's move on. He focused on turning his pedals, churning his way through the slush. Turning isn't bad, but that's not really the right active verb for pedaling. He focused on pedaling would even be better. Churning his way through the slush. Churning through the slush, I think, is better than churning his way through the slush. I'm always trying to see, like, is this sentence just better without getting rid of some, is this sentence just better by getting rid of some words? Then let's just get rid of them. Churning through the slush. He focused on pedaling, churning through the slush. Churning his way doesn't add anything. He focused on maybe, I don't know. He focused on pedaling through the slush. Might even be better, but like this can be condensed without losing any info, which is a really valuable thing. Like, you're just saving words. You're just getting, and all these little changes, a word gone here or there, it's going to bring everything so much tighter and really get the pacing going. And it's just these little drops that make a big ocean of improvement. The row of pines ended, the row of pines ended, and the cold wind bit him the moment he was exposed, making him shrink deeper into his coat. I feel like there's more here. The cold wind rushed out to meet him even, rushed around the corner of the pines to meet him, to bite him. This isn't wrong. I just think there's a little more juice here. There's a little more juice you can get if you squeeze a little harder. Making him shrink deeper into his coat. I like that. Cornfields on both cornfields were, this could be grew. On both sides stood, leaned, bent. Cornfields bent by the wind. Cornfields, I'm imagining like the tide of the wind sort of visible over the corn. I think that's a cool image. Maybe you could integrate that. But were on both sides of the road is like it's so limp. The stubs of dead stalks poking through the snow all the way to the tree line. Semicolon. Be careful with that, man. Like, it's not that you didn't use the semicolon right. It's that like a lot of people just like, we're doing semicolons. A comma is fine. I don't know about this. It just seems like a little extra frill. Like, whenever I read a semicolon, I don't know if this is a classic episode of SpongeBob where he's doing the T for his essay and he's grinding away at it, and then the camera shows that he's actually just been ornately constructing this T. That's what I kind of see when I see a semicolon. Like, it's not wrong. You can certainly do it, but just so you know, it's gonna throw some people are gonna be like, some insane people like me. The stubs of dead stalks poked. I even think. Poking through the snow all the way to the tree line, fine. Snow had drifted across the road, leaving blotches of pavement. Exposing might be better than leaving. Let's use accurate words. It is leaving it, but that's not exact. That's not right. Exposing is what's happening here, for real. Or some other word, but leaving is, again, it's like were. It's just like limp. It's not the story. The story is that it's exposing them. That's rich. That's something happening. I lost our spot. He turned his head away from the wind and eyed an imposing solitary oak tree in the middle of the field. Its branches bare and twisted in every direction in a grotesque pose. He turned his head away from the wind and eyed an imposing solitary oak tree in the middle of its field. In the middle of the field, its branches bare and twisted in every direction in a grotesque pose. It's not bad. Like, anytime I read like a pose or like stood like a, just say like, spend a little more time here. Find something like a pose is not grotesque. Even like standing grotesque is a more visceral, just rich sentence than a grotesque pose. Like, pose kind of brings down the quality, brings down the excitement. Its branches bare, twisting in every direction. Horrible, something cool. But if you can find, even if you could just rework the sentence and get rid of the word pose, I think you'd be gaining a lot. A lot, and all these critiques I've made for this page, I think, are just like, spend a little more time here and just dig out some of the rich detail. You can find some really just beautiful language that would fit in here so well, and you could cut some just limp words and really bring this out. I feel like you could bring this whole page from like an 8 out of 10 to a 9.5 out of 10 in like half an hour if you just went through it and just really just cranked out a good surgical effort. Several crows took flight from its grasp and joined the plumes of snow kicked up and dancing across the field. I like this sentence. I don't like several. It's not bad. Several crows took flight from its grasp and joined the plumes of snow kicked up and dancing across the field. You've also got a nice little not a pentameter, a nice meter. Yeah. And joined the plumes of snow kicked up and dancing. That's a very good... well, hold on. And joined the plumes of snow kicked up and almost a pentameter. That's a beautiful sentence. Like that's one of those things that like just to read it, unless you're like kind of, a lot of people will miss that, but it makes for such a beautiful sentence. Several crows took flight and then from its grasp, and it's not wrong. Like, if the meter falls off, but that's not the end of the world. Like, that's okay. Several crows took flight from its grasp and joined the plumes of snow kicked up. This is, I think, a freaking awesome sentence. A plus sentence here. It is evocative. It is nicely done. There's great language in here. It's just a freaking smooth ride. Beautiful work on that one. Wow. Several crows took flight from its grasp, enjoying the plumes of snow kicked up and dancing across the field. I mean, A plus here. Wow. Okay. His destination was at the end of one of the fields. The black gambrel roof of a white barn was all that was visible beneath the thin layer of snow it held on its steepest pitches. His father had volunteered him for a day of sweeping and shoveling at the farm. When the boy asked if he was being punished for something, his father only told him no. Okay, his destination was at the end of one of the fields. I don't even know if you need this whole sentence. And I don't really love this next one either. It's important, I think. But the black gambrel roof of a white barn was all that was visible beneath the thin layer of snow it held on its steepest pitch. I think this could be better. I think this first sentence could go, and this second sentence could just be like, something. I'm going to say a sentence, but don't use this. But like, you'll see sort of what I'm going for. The roof sort of rising up above the snow. The line of the back of a white barn, the black gambrel roof. I don't know, sort of came up over the hill, like something other than like was visible. That's limp. That's boring. It's visible, great, exciting. I know that because you're freaking telling me about it already. I know it's visible. So I think there could be some work done here. It's not clear to me that this sentence needs to be here yet. If he's going to arrive somewhere, that's how I'll know it's his destination. His father had volunteered him for a day of sweeping and shoveling at the farm. When the boy asked if he was being punished for something, his father only told him no. My instinct is that, the dad's told him basically to get lost while he buries the dog. It must be the family's farm. His father only told him. I need to think about this one for a minute. His father had volunteered him for a day of sweeping and shoveling at the farm. I mean, sorry, I thought somebody was coming up my driveway. His father had volunteered him for a day of farm work. Is that not better? And then you sort of can get into the farm work later. His father had volunteered him. I don't love the had. His father had volunteered him. His father had assigned him a day of farm work. I like that a little better. Assigned. Assigned is like commanded, but a little more appropriate. His father had assigned him a day of farm work. A day of work at the farm. I don't know. I think you can clean this up. I'm just spitballing ideas for ways to do that, but ultimately, again, it's yours. You write however you want. When the boy asked if he was being punished for something, I don't love for something. When the boy asked if I'm not crazy about not naming our characters. And there's far too many examples of brilliant stories that don't name their characters right away or at all. But I am always really hesitant to see it. It's I think too early in the story for me to say whether or not that is appropriate for you. But just so you know, a lot of people are gonna go. They're gonna get 2-3 pages in, and they're gonna be like, "Okay, I don't even know his name." Just something to keep in mind. Okay. The wind relented as he approached a grove of crabapple trees. In front of them, just on the other side of the ditch, appeared to be a single headstone. Not at the grave sign. I would even, if he's clearly into the farm, I would maybe even have a little just sentence. He got off his bike and he was in the farm now. Better than that, but we're still kind of biking, and then Is he still biking? Just on the other side of the ditch? Okay, so I guess he is still biking. Okay, I'll just take it for granted. Sorry. Or I'll just keep going. I'll just keep going. The wind relented as he approached a grove of crabapple trees. In front of them, just on the other side of the ditch, appeared to be a single headstone. He thought nothing of floors and stalls that needed to be swept. As he lifted his bicycle over a small snowbank at the edge of the road and left it lying on its side, he trudged into the ditch, and at the bottom, he sunk into the snow past his knees. When he tried to step out, he lost his left boot. Supported by heavy snow on all sides, he managed to keep his sock foot aloft as he turned in a bulky pirouette and plucked the snow-filled boot from the hole. With a series of short, violent one-legged hops, he reached the opposite side of the ditch, knocked the snow out of his boot, and put it on. His foot was cold but dry as he high-stepped out and towards the headstone. Okay. The wind relented as he approached a grove of crabapple trees. In front of them, just on the other side of the ditch, appeared to be a single headstone. He thought nothing of floors and stalls that needed to be swept as he lifted his bicycle over a small snowbank at the edge of the road and left it lying on its side. He trudged into the ditch, and at the bottom he sunk into the snow past his knees. When he tried to step out, he lost his left boot. Supported by heavy snow on all sides. That is not making sense to me. You know, he can step through the snow and it's gone, and he's gone, but he can push himself up through it. Like, he can use it as support and put his weight on it. He managed to keep his sock foot aloft as he turned in a bulky pirouette and plucked the snow-filled boot from the hole. There's something about using the snow that you just fell through that isn't jiving with me. You know, it's been a long time since I was stuck in the snow. I'm just trying to think of what you would actually do. You know, I think maybe even like you would try to take a step back. Like, I'm picturing a ditch. Maybe he like tries to support himself on higher ground when he kind of bails and goes back for the boot with his hands. I don't think pushing yourself up by snow that you've just stepped through is good enough. I don't think that's correct. But I don't know. If you're calling upon a real world experience where you fell in the snow and then used that self-same snow to prop yourself out, then you're right and I'm wrong. It just doesn't feel right. You know, and you know what? This could even be a good character. Like, he sees a stick and uses it to prop himself out. Like, okay, you know, we're showing some intelligence, some problem solving, some try and, you know, a try fail of you know, I can't get my fucking boot out. Sorry for swearing. And then I got it. I'll use the stick and that works. That'd be cool. That'd be a nice little character moment. I like this, but I like this whole thing overall. I like this moment of getting stuck. I think that's a good thing to include. But I think you get a little more juice out of it if you just squeezed and throw a stick in the ditch and have him use that to climb out. Just something problem solving or not, whatever you think. Just nice. A small drift of snow covered most of the headstone, and he wiped it away. Yeah, he wiped off the headstone. Would be fine. The boy recognized the word chief from a book he had checked out of his school library and read with the help of his mother. So we are young. Like, when I said 7 at the oldest before, I think we're going, like, maybe 6, maybe 5. A stern man with a beautiful headdress and necklaces and dressed in buckskins formed in his mind. The year meant nothing to the boy. Why was the chief here all alone? He looked down the road in the direction of the cemetery. Why wasn't he with them? He remembered once passing a cross on the side of the road during the summer, and his father explained roadside memorials. So, he concluded, the chief must have been in a car accident. He looked at... The kid knows car accidents, but he doesn't know veterinarian. He doesn't know vet. He doesn't know... He thinks of it as dog doctor. It's not wrong, just something to think about. He looked about and noticed how many deer tracks around the crabapple trees in a procession... And noticed many deer tracks around the crabapple trees in a procession of tracks leading across the field towards the woods. He stepped out of the grove and into the field. The wind was still. He took a brief look at the black roof barn, then fixed his eyes on the tree line and plodded on through the snow. I don't think there's anything wrong with this. He looked about and noticed many deer tracks around the crabapple trees. It's sort of like the visible thing, right? Where it's like, I know he's seeing it. You're telling me. It's kind of implied. Um, but I don't hate this one where he looks. I don't hate either of them. But when he looks at the Black Roof Barn, that's kind of a moment of like, I should be going there, but no. But I don't like about looking and noticing many deer tracks. Maybe just noticed. Noticing is different than looking. Um, he noticed deer tracks around the crabapple trees, and then maybe a little bit more. Scattered if there's no order to it. Do they sort of come to the crabapple tree, run around in circles around the gravestone, and then take off? A little more. He noticed deer tracks scattered around the crabapple trees, or something. If they're just kind of going there to hang out, and it's not really a greater ascended purpose or something. But I think you get a little more out of that. He stepped out of the grove and into the field. The wind was still. Yeah, and then this looking, I have no problem with. Oh, okay. The chief crouched down for a closer look at the deer tracks. He poked a finger into one, then looked up with his eyes narrowed, surveying the thick forest filled with snow-covered deadfall. He rose and crept along the tracks. Oh, and a couple of these sentences, I think you've almost done it intentionally, but these should be intended, right? Like, I'm not familiar with a reason they wouldn't be, even though they're the start of a chapter. The chief crouched down for a closer look at the deer tracks. He poked a finger into one, then looked up with his eyes narrowed, surveying the thick forest filled with snow-covered deadfall. He rose and crept along the tracks, deftly avoiding any brush he could see through the snow. I would even, just avoiding the brush for sure, but you don't need to like discount that. Sniffing, you're giving him some expertise. You're establishing his like expertise for like navigating the winter, I guess. Any brush he could see through the snow is sort of implying that he's not avoiding the ones. There's some that missed that one. You know what I'm saying? Again, if that's what you want, that's what you're painting. Okay, sniffing the air, he only noticed the cold, dry singe in his nostrils. He soon came near the edge of a small clearing where a doe and fawn were picking at a white pine. He lowered himself behind a tree and watched. Well, while he had a clear shot, he did not think of reaching for an arrow. The deer chewed and looked around, their ears reacting to sounds independently from one another and seemingly from the deer themselves. The chief strained to hear what they were hearing, but found only winter silence. Oh, I like this. The chief strained to hear what they were hearing. I like that one. He lowered himself behind a tree and watched. While he had a clear shot, he did not think of reaching for an arrow. The deer chewed and looked around, their ears reacting to sounds independently from one another and seemingly from the deer themselves. This feels a little clunky. I feel like you could trim some stuff here. More so in this next sentence. Their ears reacting to sounds independent from one another and seemingly from the deer themselves. Their ears... So... Are their ears reacting like one goes this way and they're just kind of doing their own thing, or the two deer sort of not, like they're both sort of just moving around doing their own listening and not really? Because if their ears are moving, wherever and just kind of checking around, then that would tell me that they're just sort of listening for something, but they don't hear anything. Which then it's like, why is the chief straining to hear what they're hearing? Because if it's just kind of like whatever, they're not focused on anything, then maybe there's nothing to hear. You know what I'm saying? That's, yeah. I would revisit that, I think. Okay, and I am out of time, so thank you for sharing this. Striker 7. This was quite good. As I said, one of the best pieces I've seen on really any subreddit in a long time. The last one I thought, wow, this is really good, was like a piece about like fingers growing in a farm, and that was a number of years ago. So this was a real treat. Thanks for sharing.